Friends, colleagues, and those who are online and on site. I just want to say for those of us who are in Nairobi, good afternoon. Good afternoon one more time. I don't know whether it will be in order for me to request that those who are very far at the back, we are scattered all over, that we move somewhere closer here so that we are able to have a conversation at a much more closer range than being scattered all over in the room. Mine is simply to welcome you to our staff seminar this afternoon. As you noticed last Thursday, we actually did not have this seminar that is increasingly becoming traditional to the department. Always on Thursday, Sabbath afternoon, not Sabbath, sorry. On Thursday afternoons, we always have our seminar beginning from 2:30. I say it's Sabbath because the colleagues who are actually helping us to stream this program are members of my local church here in Nairobi. And normally every time I see them, because I take part in our services in the church, so my mind switches off to Sabbath. So if you are from a Seventh-day Adventist background, I'm sure you will understand where I'm coming from. Nevertheless, welcome to our seminar this afternoon. And I was saying last week we didn't have our seminar as usual because of our international conference, which ran from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And Thursday was actually a public holiday here in Kenya. That's why we didn't have our seminar. And it gives me a great pleasure to welcome Mr. George Otieno Odeny, who is going to be the presenter of this afternoon, Mr. George Otieno Odeny, GOO. We had a conversation over lunch with Mr. Odeny, and he told me Otieno means somebody who was born at night. And his father's name, Odeny, means somebody who was born when there was famine. And no wonder that you are speaking at this time when there's a bit of famine in the country. So Mr. Odeny is a lecturer in our Department of History and Archaeology here in Nairobi, and also is a PhD candidate in the department. I have a privilege of being his supervisor. We took lunch together, and part of the agreement we almost signed is that he should be done with his PhD at least before this year is out. Malim, you give me that promise, and I will pursue it vigorously. And my colleagues are here, Dr. Nyanchoga, Mwalimu Wafula, and others. I'm sure you will be my witness. Dr. Misigo here, my classmate, you will be my witness in that. So George's research interests really are in diplomatic history, and he's finalizing his PhD thesis on the economic relationship between Kenya and Japan, particularly on the export of maize and coffee. Very interesting study. He also touches on political history, mainly looking at conflicts and the state in Africa. And actually, indeed, that is where his presentation is going to come from this afternoon. Friends, you will agree with me that issues of ethnic identity and its appropriation, use and misuse of it are historically are actually a great challenge to statehood in our continent, Africa, mainly in post-colonial, if you agree with the label, post-colonial Africa. And it has in a way consistently and persistently frustrated what I see as aspirations of statehood in the continent. And this afternoon, Mr. Odeny is going to discuss with us a paper that touches on issues of ethnic identity as it interfaces with conflict, in a paper that he has entitled "The Politics of Exclusion and Ethnic Conflicts in Kenya, 1963 to 2013. So friends, without much ado, it is now my great pleasure to welcome our colleague, Mr. George Otieno Odeny.
Good afternoon. Yeah, the title of my paper is "The Politics of Exclusion and Ethnic Conflicts in Kenya, 1963 to 2013. Sorry. Kenya boasts of about 42 ethnic groups. That's according to the latest census. Now, before the colonial rule, these different ethnic groups, any relation that happened, that took place between or among these groups, was done on the basis that they belonged to different political, social, or economic organizations. But this was interfered with by the coming of the British. The British demarcated the Kenyan boundaries, political boundaries, and so these ethnic groups were supposed to fit in within these new political boundaries. It all started in 1884, some thousands of kilometers away from Kenya, but it had impacts on how these ethnic groups will relate to one another. This was the 1884 Berlin Conference. The participants in this conference agreed that if any European power had a claim on any part of Africa, then that power was supposed to have an effective administration in that region. So in 1888, the British chartered the Imperial British East African Company to exploit their sphere of influence, which they called by then the East African Protectorate. But in 1895, this company became moribund, so the British took over the direct control of the territory. They therefore made a number of agreements with other powers, and this demarcated the boundaries, the political boundaries as we know them today. Now, the ethnic groups, these ethnic groups were supposed now to think in terms of the larger nation state called Kenya. But cultural change, whether political, economic, or social, is not an overnight process. It takes generations. So African political thinking before the outbreak of the Second World War was basically ethnic in nature. That's why most African political organizations that were formed before the outbreak of the Second World War were ethnic in outlook. The British began by establishing the colonial state by first demarcating the boundaries, and putting in institutions that will support the government of the day. They therefore formed the King's African Rifles and the judiciary to prop up the colonial government. In the colonial times, ethnic conflicts became eminent, especially when independence was around the corner. The Africans had learned from the colonial government that one can use the state power for personal aggrandizement or to reward the supporters. During the colonial times, the conflicts to control the state apparatus was between the Asians, the Europeans, and after the war, after the Second World War, the Africans joined the fray. They also wanted to capture the state power and to use it for the purposes of fulfilling their African interests. At independence, Kenya gained independence with ethnicity at the forefront in political struggles. KANU, that was formed in 1960, was seen as a loose Kikuyu-Luo alliance. The other ethnic groups, like the pastoralists, the ethnic groups from the coast, and part of the Luyas, formed their own political party, KADU. So the political struggle between KANU and KADU, although it was about the structure of the government, because KANU wanted a unitary system of government and KADU wanted a Majimbo type of government, was basically ethnic. In 1964, KADU members crossed the floor and joined KANU. And so once again, Kenya became a de facto one-party state, but this did not prevent ethnicity from being manifested in Kenya's political struggles. The main political struggles was between the Gikuyus and the Luos over who was to control the government. Ethnicity began with political elites, and the masters aligned themselves accordingly. For example, the Luos and the Kikuyus had nothing to do with political rivalries between Oginga Odinga and Jomo Kenyatta, but they found themselves hating one another politically simply because the two leaders, that's Odinga and Kenyatta, represented them in the government. So the main argument of this paper is that the state and the government became the conduit for channeling the desired values. For example, the access to financial capital, access to government-controlled jobs, and any other desired value. In 1960, there was a serious political fallout between Oginga Odinga and Jomo Kenyatta. And this also witnessed the fallout between the Kikuyus and the Luos and the formation of a loose Kikuyu-Kalenjin alliance. Now, let us see the politics, resource allocation, and ethnic conflict in Kenya under one-party system. It was very easy to manage ethnic rivalry in Kenya under the one-party system. This was because all the ethnic groups in Kenya were expected to belong to one party. So the competition between different ethnic groups was done within that one-party system. But that does not mean that ethnicity was not experienced in Kenya political struggles. It is argued that during the Kenyatta regime, the Kikuyus had an upper hand when it came to distributing the government-controlled resources. Other ethnic groups, although they could come out openly to challenge that, expressed ethnic fears that they were being dominated by the Kikuyus. But in the recent research that I did, I found out that the other Kikuyus suffered as much as any other members of other tribes. Only the Kikuyu elites benefited from the Kenyatta government. In 1978, August, Kenyatta died, and Daniel Arap Moi took over power. What was witnessed was deconstructing the Kikuyu hegemony in Kenya and introducing what we call the Kalenjin hegemony. To consolidate political power and to appease the other ethnic groups, Moi banned all the ethnic groups in Kenya in 1980 because he argued that these ethnic groups were a threat to national security. In 1991, the push for multi-party political system was experienced in Kenya. And in that year, 1991, December, Section 2A of the Kenya's constitution was repealed, and Kenya again became a multi-party state. With the adoption of a multi-party political system, ethnic rivalry became rampant because what was witnessed was the formation of ethnic-based political parties. In 1991, with the reintroduction of multipartyism, the Kalenjin politicians, majorly who supported KANU, became threatened. According to them, those who were pushing for multi-party politics only wanted to challenge Daniel Arap Moi and the Kalenjins, and this would mean that the Kalenjins will be excluded when it comes to allocating the government resources. But ethnic rivalry was not only seen between the opposition and the government, it was also experienced within the opposition itself. The differences between the Kikuyus and the Luos in the 1960s once again was experienced in Ford. The two ethnic groups were members of Ford, but with different intentions. The Kikuyus thought that it was an opportunity now to return the leadership of Kenya back to the house of Mumbi. The Luos on the other side thought that this provided an opportunity for the Luos to offer a president. So because of the rivalry between these two groups, these two ethnic groups, Ford was divided into two. That's Ford Kenya and Ford Asili. So Kenya went to the 1992 elections with ethnicity, with ethnic groups as the major claimants for political power. After that elections, KANU emerged victorious, and that elections was seen by many ethnic groups as our win or our loss, regardless, they are irrespective of how one saw it. The ethnic pattern that was seen in the 1992 elections also reflected in the 1997 elections. But ethnicity became a major point with regards to Moi's succession. Moi according to Kenya's constitution, was doing his last term by 2002. So it was argued that Moi wanted to put in power a member of an ethnic group who will take care of the Kalenjin ethnic interests. And so he began to have partnership with NDP, with the Raila Odinga's NDP. Those who supported this coalition between KANU and NDP argued that Moi was now supporting Raila Odinga to take over from him to champion the interests of his ethnic group and that of Moi himself. But Moi and his group, who are in the coalition, had a different intention with regards to political succession. With them, they wanted to cushion their numbers in parliament so that the government bills would pass. But those in NDP saw it that Moi was now championing Raila Odinga to take over from him. But this was never the case because Moi chose Uhuru Kenyatta as the KANU's presidential candidate, but this was disapproved by other political bigwigs, as I may call them, who said that Uhuru Kenyatta was not elected as the KANU's presidential candidate, that any KANU presidential candidate must be elected. So because of that wrangles, the NDP wing of KANU broke away from the government and joined the Rainbow Coalition and joined the opposition. So because of that, the opposition won the elections that were held in 2002. After that, the Rainbow Coalition entered 2003 with the ethnic baggage still haunting it. Ethnicity once again reared its head, and the NAC government was accused of ethnicity when it comes to allocating government-controlled resources.
George seems to suggest that the binary of losers and the winners in elections has always provided the lenses through which everyday Kenyans view successful general election results, actually since 1963. And this is what has always exacerbated what he sees as ethnic tensions and hence ethnic conflicts in the country. And I thought that was a very interesting argument, that this idea of winners and losers has provided everyday Kenyans with a prism through which they analyze and view successful election results since 1963 to the present. Maybe there will be some discussion there whether this was manifest in the two important elections that were held just before we gained what we loosely call formal independence in 1963. So friends, that is how I understood Mwalimu, and we now open room for discussions, opinions, observations, questions to him. We will start with, as usual, the on-site audience, and then we will go to the online audience just in a little while. So I'll ask my brother to take the microphone around. I can see the hand of Dr. Gache over there. Then we have Dr. Nyanchoga. Then who else? And then we have Malimu Masika. Those are three. Then we have, sorry, remind me your name. Sorry? Yusuf, yes. How can I forget Yusuf? Sorry, my brother. How can I forget you? Yes, Yusuf. Anyone else? Colleagues? Yes, we have Unyango just right here. Anybody from the back there? We have Caroline, Esther. Any questions from the back there? All right. I'm sure you will have them in the next round. So let's begin in that order. Dr. Gache, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, George, for that very lucid presentation. Mine is very small, really. And I would like to raise the issue that, beyond ethnic cleavages, which of course are exacerbated during the colonial period, where does the reality of class divide play? Where does it come into place in the so-called politics of exclusion and ethnic conflict? Is it an ethnic issue, or is it really a class issue? So I get a bit concerned when we say the Kikuyus did this, the Kalenjins have done that. What do we exactly mean when we lump these ethnic groups as the perpetrators, if you want, of this exclusion that you're talking about? And maybe perhaps related, at what point do we delineate again the political class, the so-called political hegemony, to what we regard as ethnic interests? The two are related, really. They speak to more or less the same issue. Thank you.
Yes, next. Yes, Dr. Nyanchoga, please take the mic. Those important questions from Maggie, class dialectic and elites. Yes.
Thank you very much. Is it working? Well, thank you very much, George, for that initiative presentation. George is my peer, and I know that he's a good researcher. I only have one question in relation to what you say, about ethnicity and exclusion, and especially access to political power. See, my question has always been, when we talk of political power in Kenya, it is kind of dominated by one or two ethnic groupings. And therefore, for me, I was wondering whether the right way you could have put it is to talk of ethnic, dominance and access to political power. Because whichever, side the two dominant ethnic groupings find themselves, they get the political power. And therefore, mentioning about the rest, like the Luos, the Kampas, and all that, hasn't really have, any much impact as far as political power is concerned. So perhaps I'm the one who didn't understand it well, but I would have suggested that maybe in terms of access to political power, we would, focus on two ethnic groupings. And therefore, we have to look at ethnic dominance and exclusion in society. Thank you very much, George. I don't know whether you understood me. I'm not a very good historian, but there is something I'm thinking from the back of my head.
Yeah, we hear you, Dr. Nyanchoga. I hope you got his question about he's trying to see the kind of dialectics you were describing as more like ethnic dominance, you know, vis-a-vis the idea of exclusion. Instead of isolating the various ethnic groups that you were talking about, is probably closely related to what Maggie was asking. Yes. Next, yes, Masika.
Thank you very much, Chair. And mine is also very closely related to what my senior, Dr. Gashi and Dr. Ben are asking. Thank you, Malim George, my senior, for that wonderful presentation. My question will be, was it really ethnicity? And going back to what Dr. Gashi asked, where do you leave the divide between Kiambu politics and the rest of the Agikuyu, the politics of Chania River? Because that seems to be where the bone of contention is. When the Kenyatta One administration seems to look at things from the Kiambu point of view, away from the rest, and that therefore pushing mostly the Gikuyu from Muranga to go to business and those from Nyeri to sink into academy. We see that coming out very clearly. And now that, do you really think it was all about ethnicity, or just the Kiambunization, if I may use that term, of the Kenyan politics? Thank you very much.
That's a very interesting one, David, there. I've never looked at it that way. And very interesting that you talk about people from Nyeri sinking into the academy. I wonder how deep the hole in academy is. Yes, Wanonyango. Yes.
Yes, Daddy.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. for the opportunity that you've advanced. The decision that Mr. Odeny has made is really very exciting, given the fact that the state being what Marx, Karl Marx describes as the committee of the bourgeois, and given the fact that we are in a very capitalistic state that we have in our country. So looking at your analysis, you began all the way from 1963 when Kenya became a post-independence state. You've really brought out those intricacies that played out to an extent that we haven't had a state that really serves the role that it should serve in a nation that we ought to have. I'm using the word ought because we are quite cognizant of the fact that what we have as a nation is somewhat some hedgepodge, as what Professor Ochieng says in his book, The History of Kenya. Given the fact that the state is expected to play certain roles, and one of the roles is to ensure that there is equitable distribution of resources in the nation that we have, which should be the nation state. And you realize that we are talking about exclusion because the state is not playing this role as expected, given the fact that the state is somewhat affiliated or somewhat, sort of teetering towards perhaps one of the components of the nation, of which one of the components that you so well delineated is the, the ethnic component. Then my question now comes in. Almost close to what Dr. Kashihi put across. What makes, ethnic, identity within the state, which is, within the nation, so much, of overwhelming, sort of, influence than other identities? Because in the state or in the nation, we have, other identities apart from ethnicity. We have cultural, cleavage. We have, gender cleavage. Why is it that the state seems, to be so much weighed down by ethnicity. Is ethnicity so domineering an identity, much more than race, as it used to happen in South Africa during the apartheid era? Is it that these identities, overwhelmingly domineering than other identities? Because there should have been some sort of, some sort of, a way in which it should be moderated by those other identities. So perhaps just bring it out so that we can understand if indeed we should either disintegrate as what we saw in Yugoslavia during the Slobodan Milosevic era, so that we have these ethnic cocoons forming, different states. Because from my analysis, then the ethnic identity has overcome. It has really put down the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanudembo. Very interesting question about what makes ethnicity a such an category that it determines statecraft in Africa vis-a-vis other identities, race, maybe I will add their religion, and many others. What makes ethnicity a such a single most important factor that seems to be undermining the aspirations of both nationhood and statehood in Africa? That's really what Udembo is asking. Yes, Yusuf, I know you are dealing with, in your project, you are grappling with such a kind of things. And Dr. Gashie, yes, proceed, please.
Thank you, Dr. Mine is just to say thanks for George for his presentation.
Yeah, put the microphone closer to you.
I just want to say thanks for George for the presentation that you have made concerning matter ethnicity. I just want to put across a question to you, touching on chapter 11 of the new constitution in Kenya. That's the issue of devolution. Does it really make any difference in terms of ethnicity exclusion or politics of exclusion in our country at the moment? Thank you.
Any other, before we give George a chance to respond and then we go online? Yes, there is, yes, tell us your name and raise your question, sir.
Yes, my name is Edwin. I'm a second year student. So I have only one question, which Dr. Nyanjoka has raised. So I have a question here. So the politics of exclusion, I'm really focusing on Kenyatta, Moi, and Kibaki factor. So how did it shape the outcome of the 2013 elections and 2022 elections, which seemed to have raised a contestation because the two ethnic groups seem to be dominating the leadership? So my question is there a way in which you can negotiate in order to pass the baton of this leadership to other ethnic group apart from the Kalenjin and the Gikuyu, so that you can break this barrier of ethnic dominance in leadership? Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for you. And this is very encouraging that we have our undergraduate students taking interest in our seminars. And we want to encourage you to come many more times with your friends. And you're becoming a scholar. This is how it begins. And we like your interest and encourage you to do this more. Very important question there as to how exactly in real terms was ethnicity manifest in the 2013 elections, 2017, and the most recent one, and how does that interface with the fact that we have had two dominant ethnic groups in the country, and where does that leave the rest? I hope I understood your question well. Now, George, since I have this mic on this side, allow me to ask the last question on this idea of on-site participants. Now, George, no doubt, I mean, your arguments are very valid. and very, very, very noble things that touch on identity and Kenyan politics. But as I listened to you, I took my mind back of, and this is a historiographical question. You see, a number of scholars from different theoretical dispositions have looked at the issue of ethnicity, not ethnicity, but the issue of the state and its evolution in Africa. You see, the 1960s were dominated by the dependency scholars, mainly political scientists. You know, Andrew Gunda Frank, Idi Amin, and you know, the ike of those guys who studied the African state and saw it through the prism of, you know, the former so-called colonial masters, and I'm using that in quotes, and their continued dominance in the colony. If it's the case in Kenya, it's London versus Nairobi. You know, it moved then very quickly, and we had the dominance of socialist Marxist interpretation, which revolved around the African bet bourgeois. You know, in those days, what some scholars call the comprador class, if my memory serves me well. And it brings in the idea of class dialectics that Dr. Gache referred to earlier. Of course, we have other apologists for colonialism who have tried to overemphasize ethnicity, and with the deepest respect to one of the leading African scholars, Okwadibo Noli from Nigeria, who wrote extensively about ethnicity. I'm tempted to look at much of his studies as a way of apologizing for colonialism and placing the problem on the victims of colonialism. Now, historiographically, where do you place your study? That's a question that went through my mind. Where, in terms of theoretical understanding, where do we locate your study? What is the locale of your study in terms of all these historiographical patterns that we have seen in the study of politics, the state, and nationhood in Africa? I hope you understood my question well. Okay, thank you, sir. Now we give you a chance to respond, and then we go to the online audience. Yeah, you can come up here.
Thank you very much. Let me start with Dr. Gashi's question, that where do we put other groupings like class and things like that? My response to that is that political representation in Kenya is basically ethnic. That's why ethnic groups are more elevated when it comes to political competitions in the country. Now, these class interests are normally there, but they hide behind ethnicity. So when the class interests are threatened, then they recourse or they revoke their ethnic identities to cover up or to protect themselves from the threat. That's why ethnicity has become a major force in Kenya's politics. Dr. Ben's Nyanchoga's question that two dominating tribes in the country, the two dominating tribes when it comes to political leadership is itself exclusion. They're excluding others. So there's nothing, to me, there's nothing we can do about it. That's to me. Other to Masika, that is related to what Dr. Gashi asked. I think the rivalry between the Kiambu and the other regions and the other Kuku regions, they were there, but ethnicity took a center stage, and it painted these other, it suppressed these other interests that arose within the Kikuyu political struggles. Ethnicity overrode these other interests in the country. Now, to Onyako Odembo's question, why not the rest? Why not the rest? But as I said, political representation in Kenya, just like in other African countries, is ethnic. Before, on the eve of Kenya's independence, different constituencies were created, but these constituencies were ethnic in location, apart from the cosmopolitan areas like in towns. But basically, the constituencies that are basic units of political representation were ethnic. That's why competitions between these ethnic leaders easily transformed into ethnic competitions. Now, with Dr. Obogi's question, where do I place my research with regards to nationhood and statecraft? In Africa, ethnic groups are the major units in the formation of nation states. In fact, what we have in Africa are not nations, but nation states. With the question that we asked about devolution, that is the government still controls the devolved governments through funding. That's the way the government controls those counties. I think I've exhausted all the questions.
Remain there so that you respond to a number of questions from our online audience. And I see several hands. There is a Bata, there is a Waka, then there is Kinuthia, and there is Shilabuka. And I would like to request Bata Renjeu, our own student, to start off. But before Bata starts, there is somebody who wrote here, and George, this is closely related to the question I asked. Charles Karani, who says, the presentation was great. However, most of the literature already exists, especially the one by Joe Hamisi in 2013, Looters and Grabbers. So he's asking, what is new in your study? What is novel in what you are telling us today? That's what Karan is asking. What is that we didn't know that you are telling us? So we'll go to online. Let's have Bata, unmute yourself and proceed with your question, please.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone present. All protocols observed. I hope I'm audible. Thank you, Mr. Odeny, for your wonderful presentation. Thank you for taking up the subject that is both emotive and what's it called? It keeps on recurring. Now, my question to you mirrors the question that Mr. Masika had. We may presume that ethnicity is the core of our politics, but what if instead of it being ethnicity, it is pure thuggery that is hiding in ethnicity? For example, if I choose to be a thief, or I choose to be any kind of ill-behaved human, and I choose to hide it behind the fact that I may be called a Meru, I may be called a Luo, I may be called whatever I'm called, and then I rally everyone around me knowing our tribal affiliations and how strong our tribal links are, and then you use things like, it is our tradition, it is our way of life and stuff like that. In reality, I'm actually a thug. But to hide myself, I go and hide behind my ethnic cocoon. Do we still blame ethnicity for that? Or do we attribute ethnic manipulation to thuggish behavior? Secondly, and finally, what do you envision as a cure to this ethnic milieu that we're in? Because ostensibly we're meant to be building a state that does not have fragility and does not have fragmentation, especially on ethnic lines, because we're all here together, and none of us has the ability to go and form our own Kikuyu state, Meru state, Kalenjin state. So how do you envision amending to these fractures? Thank you.
I hope you have gotten two very important questions. Let's have Dr. Francis Owaka, our colleague from the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies. Dr. Owaka, please proceed. Dr. Owaka, please proceed. I can see your hand. Maybe you will come later. Let's have Shilabuka Hamati from our Institute of Anthropology, Gender, and many other things. Yes, Sheila. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mbongi. I really want to echo what Bada said, because that was my concern, that we seem to really, I think, pat our political tags on the wrists by blaming communities. Who's this fellow who likes talking about negative ethnicity? And we seem to be falling in that trap. What I see is a bunch of guys who have come together and decided that among us, nobody else will come to divide us, but let's all of us rally our communities behind us. Then what we have is a gullible, is a group of gullible Kenyans who follow them blindly and believe that since my fellow Luya Kikuyu is eating, therefore I'm eating by affection or by association, and we have this psychological uplift from seeing one of us in a position of influence, even when we are really living in situations of penury. So I would have liked Odeny to really highlight, really not a question, but just to enhance and enrich his presentation, maybe for purposes of publication, to really delve into the issue of band mentality, this hegemonic, leadership of people who have refused to see sense, and they use ethnicity and ethnic identity as a ladder for malfeasance, a ladder for enriching themselves, and therefore they rest very well knowing that we will not address the real issues affecting this country. Ethnicity is not our problem. Our problem is, one, ignorance. Two, the love for shortcuts. And every one of us, I believe, many of us in this country want to be in that position at whatever cost. And that's why, what is his name? Referred to the academy as a sink, inadvertently, but it's a Freudian slip, I think, that we believe being in the academy is being in a hall. Being up there, get outside there is being up there. So I would have liked, or even suggest that Odeny looks at deeply how ethnicity is manipulated and used by those people in positions of influence, not necessarily positions of leadership. Because we may find that even the leader himself may not be benefiting from the leadership. It is a cohort of people around him or her who are interestingly also in many cases from the same ethnic community and therefore eating on behalf of the community and feel that they are privileged. The community may just follow them blindly, but they may not even know that they're being manipulated, or if they know, they are helpless to do anything about it. So that's my comment, Dr. Mbongi.
That has very some kind of resonance with Michael Wrong's book, It Is Our Time to Do What? To Eat. And
you're right.
Lai is saying the issue is more of misuse of the ethnic identity by the elites. Then we go back to the question that Dr. Gache asked earlier about the interface between ethnicity and class, class differences, as it were. Yes, let's have Muniu Kinuthia.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible. My name is Munio Kinovia. I'm also a student at the university, although in a different department. Now, Molim Odeny, in relation to devolution, you have observed that it cannot be seen as a tool that can aid ethnic exclusion. But let us look at it this way: that perception can be a political reality. The perception that power has been devolved, power has been shared. So to that extent, don't you see devolution as a tool that can be used to help address ethnic exclusion? Two, Dr. Ben mentioned something to do with a political duopoly. So to what extent does our political constitutional architect aid in a political ethnic mobilization in Kenya? Thank you.
Very important questions from Kinuthia, who says he's from another department. He didn't say which one, but I hope he will have a chance to say. Very, very important question, particularly the second one. Are there ways in which our Constitution 2010 promotes ethnicity in some sense? Let's have Dr. Wakana. Francis.
Yes, Chair. Congratulations, Mr. Odeny. I can see you are on a nice path. Very good presentation. But Chair, this is my comment rather than a question. Odeny has presented an idea of the question of the African state. But I want to inform him that the African states are colonial in nature, and they were meant to serve the colonial interests. They were never meant to serve African interests. Now, the question that Odeny is grappling with, the question of ethnicity. Ethnicity is not undermining African interests. Actually, ethnicity is serving African interests. But you see, ethnicity runs contrary to the interest of the colonial state. That contradiction is what is giving us problems in Africa. So let us, as scholars, let us find a way in which ethnicity, because ethnicity is the fundamental, the basic unit within which Africans were organized. Economically, they are organized. Politically, they are organized socially. Let us understand and find a way in which these two can run in parallel. The colonial state is an economic state. It is meant to exploit you. It is not a political institution. It's an economic institution. We are simply using politics to, as Chairman you just said, to make it our turn to eat.
Otherwise, this is just essentially an economic institution. Whereas ethnicity has all the social values and benefits that Africans would enjoy. My problem is when we look at ethnicity in the negative. Ethnicity in Africa is not negative. Two, our problem is to look at the African state, which is barely 60 years old, and compared to Western states that have been there since 1490s. Okay, so my understanding with my understanding of Odeny's issue is he thinks that there is a contradiction that is political in nature. Let him separate the colonial state, which serves the colonial interests, and let him look at African ethnicity, which serves African interests. Thank you, Chair.
For your observation, very, very important. Maybe again, what is beginning to come out very clear, Mr. Odeny, you might want to tell us what you mean by ethnicity, because as we discuss, seems like we are confusing ethnicity and ethnic belonging. Belonging to a certain ethnic community. We seem to be confusing it with ethnicity. And also, your very persistent use of the concept tribe took me back to my undergraduate days. My very good mentor and teacher who made me who I am today, Professor Godfrey Muriuki. When we were in undergraduate, I used that concept of tribe in one of my term papers. He almost dispatched me to the other world. He was very upset with me. I think that's the last time I used it in an essay. So the thing is, at some point we were increasingly being discouraged as historians, as students of politics, from using the word tribe because it comes with a pejorative connotation. It was used by early anthropologists to refer to what they call savage, wild, ignoble people who experienced no meaningful change that history can talk about. So maybe we need to be cautious on the use of concepts here, particularly tribe and all that. I'm more at home with ethnic community or just community. So Malim, can you respond to that, and then we will come back here to the on-site audience, and then we will finish.
Yeah, to start with, I was reluctant to use the word tribe in my presentation because the word tribe has got some negative connotation. As you rightfully said, it was coined, it was used by the early anthropologists to paint Africans as savages. That's why I was very reluctant to use it. Now, what is ethnicity? Ethnicity to me, I think is derived from the word ethnic, from the word ethnic group. And ethnic group is a people with the same language, the same religion, and the same cultural practices. So the sense of feeling to be a member of an ethnic group, to me, is what we may call ethnicity. But ethnicity is not inherently a bad phenomenon. We can have positive ethnicity because everybody was born as a member of an ethnic group. So positive ethnicity. But negative ethnicity is when we tend to use our ethnic group as a shield towards the threat that might come from other quarters. Now, somebody asked, what's the keyword? What's the keyword then? The keyword is that if we can take away the state's responsibility as to allocate values, and we put them somewhere, then the struggle to control the state by ethnic groups will not be there, because if anything, there's nothing to control there. Then somebody asks, is the evolution a cure to rampant ethnic rivalry? Of course, it is a cure. If these devolved governments can be autonomous and can delink themselves from the national government, then people will only scramble to be members to control the ethnic government, the devolved governments, but not the national government. And the devolved governments are basically ethnic in nature. So what we will see will be a rivalry of clans within those devolved governments. Then what is new in the study? Ethnicity is a huge topic. Others have seen it differently from how I saw it. Others have been arguing that ethnicity is as a result of political leaders, but my study will say that ethnicity, rampant ethnic rivalry, is as a result of the organization and the structure of the state, or the role of the state as a conduit for distributing what is being desired in the society. So that was my concern when I was doing the research, the role of the state in promoting ethnicity in the country. Thank you.
Probably remain there because we want to come back to the on-site audience. But as we go to the on-site audience, Mwalimu Odeny, I liked your definition of ethnicity and thought perhaps you might want to revisit. The best definition I've read of ethnicity is by the Nigerian author Kwadibo Noli that I referred to earlier. And especially with your idea of course, same language to some extent, some certain cultural practices. I'm not quite sure about religion. Maybe you need to relook at that as a distinguishing category of what ethnicity is in terms of definition. Maybe you might want to quote unquote revisit that. You know, the word revisit in our political language means many things. That's why I'm using mine in quotes. You might want to revisit that definition vis-a-vis what established authorities have given us. Let's come to our on-site audience. Let's come to our on-site audience. And yes, right at the back, please tell us your name. I think I need, oh, that is Naomi. Yes, Naomi. My friends, you know, we wear glasses because we have a disability, not because we want to look handsome. I can't see there. Yes, Naomi, I can see you now as you stand.
Thank you so much for your presentation. There's something I didn't get clear. The question that Dr. Mbongi asked about where the presentation or your work has been placed historically. So I think that didn't come out clearly while you're answering your questions. I would like to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, Naomi happens to be one of our students, just about to present her proposal. She is back to the question I asked her earlier. Historiographically, what is the locale of your paper? You know, where do you place it within the historical study of the state and politics of exclusion and the kind of things that you have been discussing? I hope that is clear. Next. Yes, Odembo is coming back again. Odembo has just finished his MA from our department. These are the kind of things that you are dealing with. Also, an upcoming strong scholar on the state and its interface with conflicts. Particularly, he looked at the Moroni Nandi border, the Luo Nandi border in Nyanza. Very interesting project that you came up with.
Thank you, Daktari, for the accolades. It was Daktari's really a mentorship that birthed that whole achievement. Indeed, yesterday I shared in our platform the currency of what we analyzed under your very worthy, mentorship. Indeed, it was on the floor of the House. The Senator of Kisumu was really touching on those very issues that we started around with you, talking about the border between the Luo and the Kipsigis in Sondu, and the border of the Luo and the Nandi at Chemenil. You recall we mentioned all that.
Yeah, put the mic close to your mouth.
Yes, yes. So I just wanted to say that you see our study that Dr. has just mentioned is very, very, we have indicated yesterday on the floor of the Senate when the Senator of Kisumu talked about all the issues that we scattered around. Indeed, I was even telling my friends that look at the thesis that we developed, under the guidance of Dr. at the university. It touches on all those recommendations I gave the County Commissioner of Kisumu and Nandi. But the intricacies we know much better with Daktari because he was the brain behind all that. So my question, or perhaps the first commentary that I want to make, this is the second time I'm coming on the floor, is that could we perhaps be having a situation where the ethnicity as an identity is more sinned against than sinning? Because the state, being the organized polity within the nation, should be in a position to rein in, a wayward element like ethnicity. Being, an officer in the public service, the government has taken a lot of, has put a lot of strategies in place, and even establishing institutions to ensure that we rein in exclusion that comes about because of such elements like the ethnicity. We have equalization fund. We have entities like the one that we are in, National Cohesion and Integration Commission. We have the Affirmative Action Fund, which are interventions so as to take us back to what the state has set out to do in the nation state that we are in. So I was just looking at the paper that was done by Dr. Ludeki Chwea, the current, is the current Director General for, of Kenya School of Government. Dr. Chwea argues that nation state, which is very much, aligned to African situation, the nation state, is one of the elements or one of the vestiges of modernity. Because on modernity, we talk about nation state, we talk about its related, vestige, like liberal democracy. We have capitalism, and we have, industrialization. So Dr. Chwea is putting across, as Dr. Mbongi really mentored me, the crux of his argument is that the current turmoil that we are witnessing, of which has led to what you are terming as exclusion, because ethnicity has become more domineering to the state. It's because the turmoil that we, realizing that we're witnessing is because these other vestiges or elements of the modern feature that is the nation state are fast-tracked much earlier than what the state is, because the state, as you are aware, is much more a conjugated element together with the nation. It should exist on its own, but what Dr. Chwea says is that these other elements of modernity have been fast-tracked ahead of the state. So that's why the state is really struggling to catch up with them. Liberal democracy, issues of people demanding for their rights. And I know that in the current constitution, Article 10, one of the national values that we have is inclusiveness, trying to address issues of exclusion. So it says that these other elements of modernity, liberal democracy, preceded the development of the state. So that's why we are seeing all this turmoil. Capitalism, preceded the nation state. So this has led to a situation where I think, as we analyzed Dr. Mbongi, a situation that Daniel Branch talks about as a bureaucratic executive state, such that the state is at beck and call of those whom I say are the persons that control its operations. So looking at that, Mr. Odeny, you could really flesh out your argument much better, looking at what Dr. Chwea says, that those other vestiges are overcrowding the space for the state. Thank you.
Okay. Odembo is bringing back the idea of the notion of the minimalist state in Africa, and arguing that we have overused ethnicity as an excuse. I like the term you use. We have sinned against ethnicity than vice versa. And then he's trying to ask you to make a comment on, the contingent factors that seem to play away from ethnicity, that have undermined the stability and also the viability of the African state. I hope you got that clearly. Yes, we have Mwalimu Kule and Mwalimu Tabitha there, and let's start with this one. Just hold on. Please introduce yourself and
thank you. I'm Mohammed Amin.
Put your mic closer to your.
Yes, I'm Mohammed Amin, a fourth-year student of political science and economics. So my question, first of all, I would like to thank for your presentation. So as we look at our national politics, it's a reflection of what happens in the university. Our students or the university politics, which we have seen from time, we hear since the time of the Kina Orengo, who are divided along their ethnic line. But coming back to 2016, when the Duale Bill on student leadership and politics in the university, it brought about the diversity of the communities in the leadership, student leadership. So that one, we can borrow it from our student leadership politics here in the university to the national politics, where we align or have a bill or law that guides us to have, let's say, the leaders or any politician to align in a way that is marginalized communities or whatever, to have the ethnic dominance cut short, because some people feel they are neglected or they are not part of the nation. So to build our nation, we at least borrow that concept. Yes, Duale used it to to minimize the roughness in the university politics, but anyway, it helped to bring out the marginalized communities. And two, what's the role of the social media right now? For instance, during the 2022 elections, some people tried to use the ethnics to bring the ethnic conflict around, but people uprolled and said no to ethnic politics. We are doing our election peaceful, and on that I will ask Mr. George to at least comment on the social media. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm always glad when I see our students coming along to share with us, and I always become very confident that our future is taken care of, and we should be on our way out so that we leave space for them. Thank you very much for having you here. And he has brought a very important point, George, that we have always thought that student politics within university setting are simply a microcosm of our national politics, but he seems to suggest otherwise, and suggest that there is one or two things that national politics of Kenya particularly can learn from the university, especially with the recent legislation which give provision to certain representation within, I think, the student union organizations. I hope that's what you are referring to. And then the issue of social media, very, very, very important. There's one of our colleagues who wrote a paper on social media and the politics of rumor and how it contributed to the 2007-2008 post-election violence in Nairobi. Very interesting paper to read, but I hope you will respond to the gentleman. Yes, now let's have Tabitha and then Mwalimu Kyule.
Okay, thank you, George, for our wonderful presentation. I've come listening to you as I was coming for this seminar. And maybe I want to address what Mr. Onyago is probably saying. To me, Onyago, the word that probably we may bring on board is that George is addressing the problem of what we can call manipulation of ethnicity. So ethnicity is being manipulated in the essence that this has led to what we are seeing in the society, monopolization of state resources. We are also able to see aspects of what we can call a non-inclusivity in the political system, as it is in the case in this country. And probably we can be able to argue it out that there lacks a democracy or a democratic system to be able to address such problems. So manipulation of ethnicity is the key here.
Well, this seems to be coming back. It started with Dr. Gachi again, and now Mwalimu Tabitha. Yes, Mwalimu Kyule.
Asante sana, Chair, and asante sana, George. Mine is brief. I'd like your comment on our neighbors. Tanzania, for example, doesn't seem to have this challenge that we have. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that. And then when we look at the other neighbors that we have in the East, Somalia is more or less just one country with one ethnic group. I don't know whether you can also comment on how that plays out compared to us. We are so many. We are told we are 44. Some other people tell us we are 50 something. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mwalimu Kyule. It refers to the situation in Tanzania, George. It is Mwalimu Nyerere who used to dismiss ethnicity or what somebody is calling ethnicism online as upumbavu ya wa Kenya. I'm sure you have listened to Mwalimu Nyerere's speech where he dismissed ethnicity as upumbavu ya akina nani? Ya wa Kenya. And Mwalimu Kyule is actually grappling with an issue. Why is Tanzania seeming to be doing well when it comes to the effect and influence of what others have called negative ethnicity in their everyday life comparatively to Kenya? And then the situation in Somalia, one people, one region, many things. How come they have been split and divided the way they are, to the point that a Somali state doesn't look very viable in the near future?
Now, let me start by responding to my friend about social media and the role it played in the just concluded elections in Kenya. I went through a number of literature or a number of writings in the social media, and to me, the social media was being used to encourage ethnicity by the comments that those who are participating in those social media were expressing. They were basically expressing ethnic sentiments. That's according to me. Now, to Kiula's question about Tanzania, when we look at the politics in Tanzania before independence, ethnicity was basically suppressed. Ethnicity was not a factor in Tanzania's African nationalism towards independence. In fact, anybody who was talking about ethnicity was disparaged because of that. That's why ethnicity never became a factor in Tanzania's politics. In Somalia, instead of ethnicity taking a center stage, we now had clanism taking the center stage in political struggles. That's why there are violence, there are conflicts in that region. Now, some would ask, where is my research in the historiography of statecraft or nationhood? There are two major, to me, there are two major conflicting views about the formation of the state in the world. The first view is Eurocentric in nature, and it doesn't recognize ethnic groups as major units within the states. But African states are less than 60 years old. So ethnicity is still a major unit in the formation of states. And even those other European states, ethnicity is also a unit in their formations, only that they're not often talked about like it is in Africa. So my research is an Afrocentric view of the formation of the state, that ethnic groups are major political units in the formation of those states. That's why we are talking about nation states in Africa, not states. Now, Onyango was concerned that there are very many beautiful ways or legislations that have been put to manage ethnicity in the country. But those legislations just remain on paper. But in reality, ethnic favoritism is still being played even by those who make those legislations. So even if we talk about national cohesion, it will just remain at that. But in reality, the practice is that ethnicity is still being considered as a tool in political support, in mobilizing political support, and for rewarding loyalism. So ethnicity will still be there with us, even if we come with those beautiful legislations. I think I've finished with the questions.
Thank you, Joe. There is, I think there's a question somebody raised here, but let's take one from online audience. I think Bata forgot to lower their hand, and I hope Silabuka the same thing. But we have a new one, Anyona Ondigi. Anyona.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're loud and clear, Mr. Anyona.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Actually, I didn't get to listen to the whole presentation because where I'm staying, we are being plagued by lack of electricity, which also affects our Wi-Fi. So I had to travel far and buy some data so that I can, still be following your, the presentation. So my question is, actually I have a lot of questions, but because of time, let me just ask one question. I don't know whether the presenter touched on the fact that the European, the colonizers, are the ones actually who played a big role, you know, to sharpen and exaggerate ethnic differences and ethnic divisions. And then our political elites inherited that. And then now the tragedy is that many people are saying that for us then to have a united Kenya, because as the situation is now, what is happening is that the state of Kenya on one side, which is a colonial construction, is being pitted against ethnic belongingness. Now the question is, what should be the way forward then? Because as it is now, many people are saying that for us then to, you know, to have a Kenya which is united, for us to coexist peacefully, we should then even stop speaking in our indigenous languages. We should even stop using, I mean, that's why you even see some people on social media and everywhere else trying to under-communicate their ethnic belongingness. Here, I mean, they're trying to cover, they're trying to hide. They're going for English names now or European names, just so that we can have, so that we can coexist peacefully as Kenyans. And my issue is that going forward, I think at this rate, we are going to lose ourselves as Africans, just because we're going to have this Kenya, which is a colonial construction, whereby we're going to lose our indigenous languages, our cultural ways, which had always, you know, which had always sustained us for hundreds of thousands of years. But because of this modernity, which is actually about the universalizing, you know, Western ideologies at the expense of our African identities. So then what should be the way forward? Thank you.
Versus relativism, when we look at the appropriation of identity and the ethnic identity, I guess, in particular. Shilabuka says this is a new question. Shilabuka, unmute yourself and proceed, please.
Briefly, I liked Owaka's comment on the political and economic aspects of the state. And then he went on to talk about how much Europe has invested in terms of time and effort, and the US to be where they are. And we are blaming, we actually beating ourselves too much when we have just been in existence for at most 60 years or so. While I agree with him on that point, I also disagree to some extent, because if you look, countries like Singapore, Malaysia, and the so-called, if you look at Brazil, these countries have taken less than 50 years to be where they are, and they're almost at par with Europe and the US, almost. When it took the US and Europe almost 400 years. So we shouldn't really hold ourselves back with this idea of our ethnicity being something backward. You'll find Singapore people, they identify themselves the way they are. They are not as much westernized as Nairobi is in terms of mannerism, but they have taken some aspect of Western cultures and incorporated in their own. The same with Brazil, even India. You can think of India. And what these people have done is to actually look back at their indigenous cultures and brought forward what is compatible from the Western world into their own cultures, and then amalgamated some kind of cultural syncretism. So we shouldn't really think about the time frame, much as it's important. So our ethnicity, as my colleague who's just spoken is indicating, is not something to be shy about. It's not something to be embarrassed about. this is us. What can we do with our identity to march into the millennia ahead? That's my thinking. And that's what some of the things that I want, even not just George, all of us who are researching and teaching and talking about development in terms of ethnicity, politics and stuff, to think about analyzing and putting forward ideas on how our identity as Africans can march into the 22nd century. So without losing our identity, and then also maintaining this so much vaunted unity. And we know that even in the US, there are so many fissures that go underneath, but nobody talks about them. They are very happy to magnify ours. Thank you, Chair.
Specific factors, Singapore-specific factors, particularly the strong hand of the founder of modern Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, that made a very big difference that we see in Singapore. That is probably as opposed to the first generation of African leaders in this part of the world. And you use the example of India. India is probably bedeviled much more by what they call communalism, as opposed to ethnicity the way we understand it in Africa. The conflicts between Muslims and Hindus affect India more than what we conceptualize as ethnicity in this part of the world. And if you read scholars of communalism, such as Amit Sankal and Satish Sabharwal in their works on Indian communalism, you find that they are equally divided mainly on communal and caste and caste, not caste, caste lines. So that's also another examples that we can think about. So. Bata, do you want to come back with some more questions? Or that is an old hand?
Hello, sir. It's a new hand. And thank you for the opportunity to come back. I have just one question. Actually, not a question. I have a clarification to make. We have gone into a deep discussion on ethnicity, and I'm also seeing here the suggestion that we talk of it more as ethnicism, which has a negative connotation such as nepotism. My question is, who is the chief beneficiary of these ethnic fractures in our society? If, as was noted by one of my colleagues earlier, the Somali cannot seem to create a stable state despite them being one community. Yet here we are expected to create a stable state with over 40 communities. In Tanzania, they have more communities than we do, and they seem to create a stable state. So my question is, who is the chief beneficiary of these ethnic fractures? Because in Kenya, it did not start today. It started at the time of the colonial state. It started in the colonial state, where we know that the British preferred some communities to others. And we know, as recorded in Caroline Elkin's book, that the British sought to see the end of the Gikuyu as a people. Are we just inheriting British mentality or British colonial mentality or Western mentality about who a good African is and a bad African is, to paraphrase Mamdani in Good Muslim, Bad Muslim? Or is there an actual benefit in terms of our own accrued benefits as Africans to claiming that I as a Luya or I as a Kalenjin, I'm better off than my friend or colleague who comes from maybe Kikuyu land or Kisi land or somewhere like that, who are the main beneficiaries. Now, on foreseeable futures, I suggest that, as I suggested before in a previous discussion, perhaps Mr. Odeny may go and may have a look at some of the output from the British Institute in Eastern Africa on imagined futures. So, for example, when we describe ethnicity as an attribute that we have the same language, live in the same locale, have the same religion, by that we can also assume that for me and my 5 Christian friends who all speak English, live in Athi River and go to church together, then we are also our own community. So perhaps we can look at imagined futures and what it is that our ethnic projections will bring us to. Thank you.
It's very nice comments that will enhance the revision of your paper. I've not had any, hard questions that you need to respond to, unless you feel strongly that there's something you want to respond to.
I just want to respond to a question.
Very quickly in a minute.
That somebody asked that what role did the colonizers play? Did they play a role in funding ethnicity in the country? My response would be yes. When the colonizers came, they used the policy of divide and rule to limit the interaction between or among the different ethnic groups in Kenya. So what they were trying to do was to suppress the political thinking of the Africans to think in terms of the whole nation state, of the whole colonial state. But they only wanted Africans to think in terms of their own ethnic groups. That's why they were trying to limit the interaction between or among different ethnic groups. Then somebody asked about the way forward. What's the way forward then? To me, the way forward is alternating presidents. That is it. So that you know that this time round, it is a member from the other group. That time round, the next election, I should not even bother. It's from the other member of the ethnic group.
Okay, Malim, you can have a seat. Thank you very much. You see that model, or one similar to that, is actually followed in Tanzania between what used to be Tanganyika and Zanzibar. If the president comes from mainland Tanzania, you know that the vice president will come from the island, and vice versa. That's probably what Malim is saying. But as I always say, we are historians. And if historians were ever prophets, we are prophets of the past. To end this, I can see some comments. A debate is ensuing between Francis, Dr. Waka, and Amati here. If I may read something here where Dr. Waka is saying, answering Hamati, you are agreeing with me, our ethnicity is positive, not negative. The West has invested in the colonial state, which sought to destroy African ethnicity. Singapore, Malaysia, China, etc. rejected the Western hegemony, but borrowed Western technology. Hamati is answering back saying, actually, I think India is moving ahead to catch up with the globalizing world, which is really true. I know quite a bit of India. That's very true. I think I'll leave it there and invite my classmate, Dr. Misigo, to come and finish this for us. Thank you.
Good evening once again. Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I am here to make a very brief session of vote of thanks. First of all, let me thank George Otieno Odeny for the wonderful presentation that he has given us this evening. Without him preparing for those many hours, and I'm sure missing his wife in the bed, we couldn't have been here to listen to him. Those of you who know me and Odeny, we remember that I am the reason why Odeny is in this university. In 2001, I met him in the corridor. He was going home. I told him, go to class and teach. And that is how he became a member of staff. So there was no ethnicity there. Right? Secondly, we want to thank the chair for the leadership in the department. He has been very, very enthusiastic and very determined to see that this aspect of teaching takes place every week. When we come here, we learn something new. So apart from teaching in class, the chairman has decided that we must also learn from our colleagues and our students. The chairman did not do any education, but he is showing us the variety of ways through which we can learn, particularly for us who are old. Yeah, there's a word that they use in education about teaching the old people. You don't teach them by giving them notes. You teach them through interactive studies. So we want to thank the chairman for bringing this mode of teaching in the department every week for us to learn. Thirdly, the audience here and the audience online. Without you, this interactive session could not have taken place. We want you to continue attending these meetings, these seminars, for us to learn and interact. And looking forward, we'll ask the chairman to start playing golf so that he can look for money to publish these papers. You know, the chairman tells me that people are employed on golf courses, they are sacked on golf courses. He was a CEO, so he knows that. So many things take place in golf courses, and I'm sure when he's playing with his Indian friend golf, he'll ask them, give us 1 or 2 shillings for us to put these papers under publication so that they can have a wider audience of leadership. So with those few remarks, we want to thank you once again for finding time to come here today to listen to the presentation by George Odeny on the politics of exclusion and ethnic conflict in Kenya. We are looking forward to another presentation next week and the week after. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps nice for you to make some announcements, Chairman.
Not much. We are meeting next week, same place, same time. Please make that appointment with us. And we are having, is it Geoffrey Sang presenting? Geoffrey Sang is a friend of mine. We have been doing some work together. So he's going to talk about some biblical aspects and translations. So please make yourself available. And as Malim says, we are on course in publishing the series that we had last semester of these seminars. And also we are looking forward to have our conference proceedings, the conference we had last week, published. And we will also explore possibilities of publishing the papers that we have in these seminars. The thing is, let's remain together as colleagues and students and everybody else. And with the unity of purpose, many things are possible. Thank you. God bless you. have a good Nairobi afternoon, and the rest have a good time.